Welcome to Pittman and Friends, the curiously probing, sometimes awkward, but always revealing conversations between your host, Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman, that's me, and whatever brave and willing public servant, community leader, or elected official I can find who has something to say that you should hear. This podcast is provided as a public service of Anne Arundel County, so don't expect me to get all partisan here. This is about the age-old art of government, of, by, and for the people. All right, y'all are in for a treat this week. I have my really good friend on, Pittman and Friends here, the governor of the state of Maryland, the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland, Wes Moore. Welcome.
Thank you, CE. Great to be with you, man.
Yeah. I know we've both been looking forward to this.
Yes, I have.
And I want to say that it'll come out in about a week. But for folks, the governor is here in Anne Arundel County at Kinder Farm Park right now. His whole cabinet will be showing up in about 45 minutes, and he's doing his cabinet meeting here. And then we're going to take the group out, and we're going to see some cool stuff around the county.
Yes.
But we may or may not have time to get into that. Let's start with you and me, okay?
I love it.
All right.
I love it.
Like how we met and how I ended up on Team Moore.
Yes.
Okay. So you remember the first meeting? It was by Zoom.
It was by Zoom.
I
do remember. I do remember. And I don't know if you even know this, how it actually started happening was I did an interview early. And this was like really, really early. I was just this candidate that no one was paying any attention to and all this kind of stuff. And one of the last questions an interview asked me, he said, who are some of the people who you really admire? And who you think are just really good leaders, local leaders in the state. Mm-hmm. And the first name I said was Stuart Pittman.
How did you even know who I was? Your mom told you, right? Because she lives in Pasadena. She lives in Pasadena. You're a county
executive. And I was like, and I started explaining. I was like, I really love how he leads. I love how he listens. I love how he finds common ground and how he never leaves his values. Uh-huh. And Sophia Silverga,
right,
who a friend of both of ours. Yep. She was like, I know him. And she's like, would you want to have a conversation? And I was like, because I said, I really want his endorsement. And I was like, and I said, even past running for governor, I just want him to think that I'm a good guy. And she was like, oh, I can help to arrange it. And so, hence the interview was how she got on her radar that she was like, Wes Moore is a very big Stuart Pittman fan.
So when she came to me, I had heard your name, but I couldn't remember where I'd heard it from. And my first question, of course, was, well, what do you think? Does he have a chance? And she said, absolutely, he's going to win. And I said, okay, I better meet him. We met by Zoom, and that went well. Yeah, that went well. The next thing I did was I Googled you, and I found out that you'd written a bunch of books. So I got all the books, and in fact, I think I have one of them here. The Other Wes Moore, I read that. I read 5 Days, which was about Baltimore City after Freddie Gray.
That's right.
And I read The Work.
The Work.
That was the one I liked the most, and we may talk about that a little bit. And then I endorsed you. Yeah. We did that on stage. Early. Yeah, I know. I was one of the first people thought I was a little bit nuts.
Yes.
We did it on State Circle. It was
beautiful.
Me and my family and you and your family.
That's
I think
right.
Nobody else was there.
That's exactly right.
A couple of press showed up.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And then there was an inauguration, not that long after.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah. It was. It was it was a huge honor to me when you asked me to MC your inauguration. I'm like, oh my God, seriously? Is there a mistake here? And the coolest part of that was the fact that Oprah was there. I was too embarrassed to talk to her in the beginning, but after I gave my little introductory thing, she didn't speak to me, but she across the stage with her mouth, she mouthed the words, "That was amazing." And I thought, okay, that was my bucket list.
She still talks about your speech at the inauguration.
No kidding.
She still does. I mean, it was so hearing you tell that story, hearing you tell the story of your family, of your background, and just that full circle moment of you now saying, and now we're here to inaugurate the first African American in the history of the state of Maryland. She still to this day talks about that story.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long before that my wife, who does a lot of genealogical research, found that my great-great-great-great-grandfather, George Hume Stewart, who was the first of my lineage to come over from Scotland to here, actually built his house exactly where you live, where the governor's mansion is, and of course, he was a plantation owner. He was actually a mayor of Annapolis at one point, and talked about how he had made his wealth on the back of enslaved Africans, and here you are as our governor. It was pretty amazing.
It was an amazing day.
So let's actually jump into the serious stuff, okay?
Okay.
But the hard stuff.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And obviously, you came in and you said from before day one that there was a structural deficit that just Department of Legislative Services has been talking about for years, and the time has come to address it. And here you are this year with a budget to do so, with $2 billion in cuts, another $1 billion in revenue and tax reform. And but I want to read a quote from your book, The Work. You talk about, it's on page 38. It's near the bottom of page 38.
Wow.
And you're talking about a decision that you were about to make to go and work in finance on Wall Street. And you said, I realized how much I wanted to be involved in policy. This was after working in the White House with Condoleezza Rice and all the work you did there and how inspired you were in policy. But after my experience in budgets and budgeting there, I also realized how woefully ill-equipped I was when it came to understanding the intricacies of finance. That was the sort of thing I'd need to master if I was to turn my passion for policy into a profession. So you did that. Yeah. Is it helping you now?
100%.
Meet this moment? Yeah.
It's interesting because you realize all policy making really is, it's budgeting. Because you can see where priorities are lying and what things you're going to focus on when you look at budgets. And what's really interesting, you could do the same thing for everybody in their everyday life, right? If you show me what you spent money on last month, I can probably tell you what's important to you, right? Because that's what you're going to fund and that's what you're going to prioritize. And government is really no different. And it was interesting for me because I studied international relations and economics in college. And then international relations in grad school. But I started working in finance, and I realized two things very quickly. One, I really have more of a quantitative brain than a qualitative one. Like words are much harder for me. Really? Numbers come much easier for me.
That's shocking to hear because you're so good at words.
No, I mean it's much harder for me to process words than numbers. And I realized it was actually, I enjoyed it and it was easy as I went to the world of finance and worked for Wall Street firms and all kind of stuff. The second thing was this: I really like numbers because they don't have opinions.
Yeah.
Right? The numbers are the numbers.
And they don't lie to you.
They don't lie to you. Right? You can spin anything.
Yep.
You can't spin numbers. And I think that's the thing that when I came in and thought about even just like the structural deficit, I said, guys, this is screaming at us. And you can't spin it away. And the thing that we realized over the past few years, you can't COVID money it away either.
Exactly.
That you were getting funding from the federal government, which was really important capital to make sure that we were not laying off nurses, to make sure that people could continue getting their treatments, to make sure that we could still have government agencies that were functioning and working. It was really important capital that the federal government provided to the states. But we also knew those days were done.
Yeah, people are so confused when they see a surplus at the end of one administration that is the surplus that year, and then they find out there's no money the next year. Right. Well, it's because one-time money is one-time money.
It's one-time money.
So the COVID money is gone, the federal money, and then the other thing that happens, and I think electeds do this kind of thing all the time, and then they sort of dump the problem on the next one. I'm going to try not to do that when I leave this place, but it's common practice. And in the last administration, it was not filling positions in the government that really desperately needed to get filled. So you came in, and of course, had to commit to filling those positions to deliver services to the residents. And that's where those one-time big fund balances at the end of the year came from. They just didn't spend the money in the budget because nobody wanted to work there.
That's exactly right. And when you look at how that one-time money was utilized, again, I think it does go back to show us what you prioritize, right? So what were some of the things we put it towards? We went towards being able to fortify some of these agencies that have completely atrophied.
Yep.
And you had vacancies of 20 and 30%. And it's not that...
We felt it at the county Department of Health and COVID, Department of Labor, when people were trying to get their unemployment. It was a disaster.
I mean, people waiting 18 months for unemployment insurance.
Yeah.
It's this kind of thing. It's like you had to make sure that you had government actually working. We had to make sure that we were investing in childcare, that we made historic investments in childcare, because if you need to get an economy going, it means you have to create pathways for people to get back into the economy.
Right.
And that means stop asking parents to make a decision of, is my child going to be okay, or can I go back into the workforce? That we made historic investments in things like transportation assets. Like, there were certain things that were just so deeply neglected that we said, if we have a chance and a usage for capital to be able to get this economy growing and get this economy moving, that was an important thing. Not to mention where the recommended balance for the rainy day fund was at 5%, and we had it for in our first year in this proposed budget. The rainy day balance is at 8%. So we felt that part of the good uses of capital was make sure you're fortifying the rainy day, because when storms happen, as they're happening right now, that you're able to then have the flexibility and the resources to be able to move forward.
Yep. So you have the short-term problem of doing a budget this year, and then you have the longer-term problem, which is way more important. And the way you've talked about that, and I love this because it is so true, that in order to have no structural deficit, you have to have economic growth. That's it. And you've pointed out that the state of Maryland had 3% GDP growth at a period where the country had 13% over the last 7-8 years.
That's right.
And if we had had an 8% GDP growth, we wouldn't have this deficit, right?
There would be, if we were just growing more. Don't even give me the national average. Right.
Yeah.
Give me just shy of the national average.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have a structural deficit.
Right.
That the reason we have a structural deficit, people can point a lot of fingers as to, what happened with this, what happened with that. I said, one thing you cannot just wish away or wash away is the fact that our economy is stagnant.
Now, I'll be honest with you, when people in public office tell me that they're going to fix the budget problems with economic growth, I look back in history and I think, oh boy, here we go again with trickle-down economics, right? We're going to cut taxes. We're going to on the wealthiest people so that they'll invest, and somehow some of that money will eventually trickle down, and it's failed and failed and failed
over and over.
You have the slogan, of course, during your campaign, "Leave no one behind." And I remember the first time I heard you say that. You were at an event at Harry Brown's. This was very early. Nobody had endorsed you, including me at that point.
That's right.
And I don't think anybody even paid to get in. It was sort of like, let's meet this guy.
It's like, we're just like a meet and greet. Come on in.
But I know there were a bunch of lobbyists and people who've been around Maryland politics for decades and decades, and they aren't the kind of people that impress easily. And when you said leave no one behind, and you said that that's what you learned in the Army, the room just, like, I could feel my hair standing up, and suddenly I realized, oh, this guy's going to win. This is so good that he can inspire those folks with that message. And then when you said grow the economy, but you have the leave no one behind part, to me, that's exactly what our businesses need. Everything is about workforce. It is about people.
That's exactly
so. So how do we grow?
Yeah. I mean, we grow by making sure we're actually investing in industries that we know we have a unique opportunity to lead in. I mean, I think about industries like life sciences and IT, and that includes things like, AI and cyber and quantum. I think about industries like aerospace and defense. These are growing industries.
That's all good for Anne Arundel County, by the way.
All good. That's exactly right. And you know who it's also making sure that we're supporting? It's making sure that we're supporting the folks who are getting on the market Odenton and working on these federal jobs, which I want to talk about federal jobs in a second as well.
It's funny you mentioned Odenton Mark, because that's one of our big projects we're doing together.
That's exactly
is the parking garage. And I remember going out there with you. My favorite photograph of you and me together is we were waving to folks that were up on the train station. And we were talking about how we were going to do this parking garage, and it was going to allow transit-oriented development and more people using the train.
That was your vision. That was your vision.
A lot of people's, but yeah.
But it was important because it's the right idea, it's the right vision, and it's something that needed to make sure that we had collective support on.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure you're investing in growth industries, right? you also have to make sure you are reforming this tax code.
Yep.
Because the tax code that we have right now in the state of Maryland, I'm telling you, whether you're in St. Mary's City or Ocean City or Odenton or Wacomico, no one thinks this makes sense and no one thinks this is fair. Right? No one thinks it's fair that someone who makes $30 million is in the same tax bracket as a family making $300,000.
Exactly.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No one thinks it's fair that we have a tax code that Maryland is the only state in the country with both an inheritance and an estate tax.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Right? So the only thing we were saying was we have to be able to do the basic things that make the most sense for working class and middle class families, right? So doubling the standard deduction. Because the majority of Marylanders, that's how they are filing their taxes. Eliminating the standard deduction penalty. Because people should not have a penalty when they choose to file in something in a way that's going to put more money back into their pockets, right? That is going to essentially mean not just a tax cut for 2/3 of all Marylanders. It means no change in taxes for 82%. No, either no change or a tax cut.
And those 2/3
of
are the bottom 66%,
That's exactly
right?
right.
Okay.
It's middle class families who are about to get a tax cut.
Yeah.
Right.
So most of us, yeah.
Which is most of us.
Right.
And I tell people, and that's why that's my priority.
Yeah.
And so when people say, well, but it does mean that, the people making $1 million a year now are going to pay a quarter point more than other people, I say, I understand that. And I also know this, is A, we have to make sure we are fighting for middle-class families and the growth of middle-class families in our state. And the second thing I'll say is this, is, as someone who is going to be affected by this, I am actually okay, and I know I've spoken with a lot of folks in this who also are okay, that we will pay a little bit more if it means we can have the best public schools in America. Well, if it means we can fix our roads.
If you were in that top tax bracket from 1936 to 1981, you would have been paying over 70%. Now you're paying 37%. So that's a huge, huge cut for the top earners in America. And now we're talking about 0.5% or 1/4% or whatever it is. Increase, it's pretty fair in my view,
especially for what you're getting, and for what you're going to invest in, and for the kind of economic growth that's going to help spurn. And I think about things like when I think about people who we talk about cap gains, right? And people investing in the markets. The markets have grown over 50% over the past 2 years. Right, they're doing very well, and all projections by all the analysts are that it's going to continue to grow over the next years. So
of course, people who make their living that way are paying an even lower rate. And then you get to Elon Musk, whose Tesla pays zero. So
there you go. That's the frustration that people have. So when we're talking about doing real tax reform, it's making sure we're doing something that the vast majority of Marylanders see, will feel, put more money in their pockets because they're looking at the current tax system and say, please make this make sense. Please make it make sense that someone who is literally making all their finances on the investment markets, which are on fire right now and doing really well, that they're paying lower taxes than I am.
I don't know that there's ever been a governor who was so concerned about local jurisdictions and who communicated as closely, but when we got briefed by your staff the night before your budget came out, they gave us the exact numbers for what they were going to push onto the counties, which is $157 million. We're about 1/10 of that, $15.7 million in our $2 billion budget isn't a huge hit. But then they also showed how the tax reform proposal, if it goes through, will actually make that a wash. Because of some extra revenues that we might get. But I want to point out something really cool in your proposal too, which is that you also are dropping the corporate tax rate.
Yes.
And so I was challenged by some folks on the panel saying that, but if you raise the top earners rate a little bit, a lot of those are small business people, and they've filed as sole proprietorships, and they're paying their taxes based on their companies or their businesses' revenue. And I said, I used to be like that, right, with my business, and then we just did an S corp filing, so we became a corporation. So you didn't pay the corporate income tax. So I know that there are people who are going to get a corporate tax cut and an income tax cut because they aren't making that much in their business.
That's right.
And so they're getting the lower income tax rate and they're getting the corporate tax cut.
Which, by the way, is going to be the majority of Maryland small businesses, right? The majority of Maryland small businesses are actually going to fall into this category where you are exactly right. They are about to both get a corporate tax cut and they're going to get an income tax cut. We highlighted one person at the State of the State, Liliana, who has a printing company, Lily's Printing, that is now expanding.
God, you have a good memory.
But is now expanding in 2 different jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. And I'm like, Lily is a person who, when Hurricane Ida hit, literally had to go into a church basement to keep her business going. Her business, her and her husband started, and now they are back. They're growing. They're thriving. But they are all, just like every single person in the state and this country, are feeling this pinch. And so with this proposed new tax plan, Lily's about to get a corporate tax cut for Lily's printing, but to your point, because she's not making millions and millions of dollars like most small businesses in our state, she's also going to get an income tax cut. So she is going to get a tax cut on both fronts. And so Lily represents the majority of small businesses in the state of Maryland. So I think this is actually really good for them.
So you're going to get beat up. You're already being beat up, of course, because you're, of course, doing this big tax increase, right? Which is, we've just talked about, is not the case. And then some people say, oh, well, the millionaires are all going to leave, like they did when O'Malley for a short period had a millionaire tax. I asked somebody to look up the research on that, because somebody told me that there was a study that showed that Maryland had lost a bunch of millionaires. So we went back and Googled all that and got some. You know what happened?
Oh, yeah.
The millionaires didn't leave Maryland. It was during the Great Recession.
They weren't millionaires anymore.
They just dropped down to the next tax bracket for a little while before they came back again.
That's right.
So
and I tell you, and again, that goes back to why I really like data and numbers, because they can't be spun and they don't have opinions, right? Just look at the data of what actually happens, because you're absolutely right. This idea that millionaires will just flee and take off and go someplace else, there's no data that actually reinforces that. It's terribly expensive for them to be able to move and relocate, and not to mention the fact that for many of them, the reason they're in Maryland is because they like the quality of life. The reason they're in Maryland is because their families are here. The reason they're in Maryland is
we got great schools.
We have great schools. The reason they're in Maryland is they're leveraging the ecosystem,
we have
the business ecosystem.
Bay.
We have a Chesapeake Bay. For many of them who are in certain industries, you have some of the largest institutions and anchor institutions in the state. They're not going to leave if you increase a BIP on an income tax. It's just it's not a real thing. But it's a fascinating talking point. But to your point, one that's not reinforced by data.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the other side, of course, you have the cuts in your budget, $2 billion worth of cuts. And I've noticed that some of the things that you've been criticized for cutting, you're not actually cutting.
Correct.
They've been growing exponentially, and you're saying, look, we're going to have a pause on some of that growth until we get our finances together, or we're going to, one is community schools. So in Anne Arundel County, we're up to, I think, 12 or 13 community schools, because each year we add based on, we start with the highest poverty levels and we work our way up. And they've been wildly successful. And it's a new program. And you have not cut any money for community schools. We're simply not going to add a couple more next year. And I'm okay with that, because I understand that when you do budgets, you can't have everything you want. And I know that there's some other things like that too. So some of what is being called a cut is actually a pause in growth, correct?
That's exactly right. I mean, and if you look at, take community schools as one example. We have increased investment in community schools by 221%. So anyone who thinks that we're not committed to community schools, again, just look at the data. There is no question about our commitment to community schools. There's no question about our commitment to public education. But you're absolutely right. What we're saying is that the trajectory of the growth that has been laid out is, it's not sustainable. And we're not seeing the same type of, we've got to be able to bolster other jurisdictions, because we've watched tremendous success in community schools in Anne Arundel County, in Baltimore City, good growth in Baltimore County, but not everywhere in the state is able to see that or to be able to take on the new resources to build them as quickly. So we have to make sure we are doing this smartly and sustainably. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we had to be, and we try to be very disciplined with this budget. And to say it either needs to be, if it's effective and sustainable, we're going to continue funding it. If it was not either effective or sustainable, or in some cases either, then there had to be adjustments. And there were certain things that frankly fell into the either. There were certain things that we were funding. I'm like, why are we funding that? And you look at it's not effective, it's not sustainable, so it's cut. It's gone. And there were certain things I'm like, this is effective, but the growth trajectory we had in it is just not sustainable, guys. And so it's not a no. And it's more of a not now,
right?
Or it's a let's make sure we're doing this wisely and we're doing it right. Yep. And so that's where I think, and so a lot of this stuff, it's not easy. Governance is really, really hard.
Everything you cut has got a group of people who are going to go wild. So
that's right.
It's going to be like that, and it's going to be a good session, interesting session. I feel like you have spent the last 2 years building goodwill, showing grace to local jurisdictions, to members of the General Assembly, and so now you can do this hard thing. Yeah. And I'm glad you didn't have to do it the first year when you didn't have the goodwill built up.
I think that's right, and I think that one thing we tried to show is that when we say partnership, it's not a throwaway line. Mm-hmm. Like, we really believe in this. We really believe in working with people across the aisle. We really believe with working with our local jurisdictions, because our local leaders are the ones who are closest to the opportunities, closest to the challenges, closest to the best ideas, closest to the people. And I think very similar to you, where we don't come from this political world where everything is so hyper-partisan, right. Where it's like, everything is just, the Democrats this, or the Republicans that. Like, we don't come from that. Yeah. And so one of the things I've really admired about your leadership is, so you're like, and I'm not trying to learn that either.
Right.
I'm not trying to do a crash course or the crib notes on how to fight with another political party.
Right.
So it's like, how can we actually find ways of working together and hearing every idea and hearing every opinion to be able to make decisions in the best interest of the folks we serve?
And ultimately, it's the voters who are going to solve this, and so communicating with the voters so they understand what this budget is all about, and they go to their people and say, "What are you complaining about? Stop it."
No, that's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So I want to bring in a growth strategy that you have that is maybe unconventional, but that I love, and that you and I are going to go see today in Brooklyn Park, the highest levels of poverty in our county, in North County. We're going to be there. We have groups that are actually going also to Glen Burnie Town Center, to Crownsville and our new nonprofit center in Crownsville Memorial Park, and also to the Severance Center, and look at some violence interruption work there. You and I are going to be in Brooklyn Park at the Chesapeake Arts Center starting out. Yeah, so we had a launch program in Brooklyn Park for the Enough Act, the program that we got selected by the state. And we got selected because it's an area where we had enough on-the-ground organizations and engagement to be able to do a whole community strategy to end childhood poverty, to end poverty, and to move people into the workforce, which is a growth strategy.
It is a growth strategy.
So we are really into this. Tell us why you created it, though.
It's Enough, and it actually stands for Engaging Neighborhoods, Organizations, Unions, Governments, and Households. So basically, everybody. And it really started because this idea of poverty is terribly expensive. We spend a lot of money every single year as a state, as a country, to be able to combat poverty. When you realize that what happens oftentimes in poverty is we have policies that are putting people and keeping people in poverty. So it's become almost this larger industry that now exists within this country. And the best ideas are never going to come from the government. They're going to come from the people. And so it's like, how can we let the ideas come from the people, the government provide the supports, and not the other way around, where it's oftentimes the government comes with the idea and the people are the ones providing the supports for it. And so Maryland is now the first state in the country that actually has a state-led, place-based investment strategy on eradicating child poverty.
Wow.
And so we're now, so the communities come up with their plans. We work with the communities to develop their plans, but some of the prerequisites are that they have to work with other entities within the community. So who are your faith-based organizations? Who are your schools and your community groups? Who are, who's your local governmental partner? Like, show us the ecosystem and then show us the plan, because we know that addressing child poverty in Hagerstown is going to look different than addressing child poverty in Upper Marlboro, or what's happening in Brooklyn Park is going to look different than what's happening over in Allegheny, right? And so by really letting the solutions come from the people, tell us what the issues are in your area. Tell us what you think the solution sets are. Tell us who you're going to work with in order to create that. And then we'll come in and say, that's great. Now we're going to make sure you get the resources to be able to uplift uplift your own community. So we're very, very excited about this.
Yeah, and fortunately, we have great organizations on the ground in this county who understand it, and so I look forward to taking you around and looking at that.
Can't wait.
Here as we go. So I want to do one more thing. I know we're running out of time. One more thing that just sort of amazes me about you, that you are able to meet people where they are. I used to train horses for a living, and I used to have a blog called, Listen to the Horse. It's like, they're not going to trust you if you don't connect.
Yeah.
And I've felt like in politics and governing, it's absolutely the same. But there's nobody better at it than you. And a couple of examples are, so I'm a member of the Maryland Association of Counties, and the board, we sit around, and I think there are probably more Republican small counties than there are big Democratic counties. And
That's right.
so we're a very bipartisan organization. And I can't speak for those folks, but I'll tell you that they really like you. And what they all say is he shows up more than any governor ever has, and he listens. He really listens. And then I was with you last night at the ag dinner with 900 farmers, and I remember in the past previous governors coming there who weren't. Well, I mean, it's clearly there are more Republican farmers than Democratic farmers, for sure. But you have a way of connecting, and you've been out to a lot of their farms already. So tell me how you do that, because you're way better at it than I am. I need some
You're
advice.
very good at it. But I think people can smell sincerity, and I think people can suss out when a person's being disingenuous. I'm really blessed that we have an amazing state of people who just care deeply about their communities, and they care deeply about their families, and they just want their children to do better than they did. They want to make sure they have really good schools to send their kids to. They want to make sure that they're not getting slighted or cheated. They want to make sure that honesty and integrity is actually rewarded. They want the same things no matter where you call home. And I think what they also want from their people who are there to represent them, that they feel like those people see them. And at the end of the day, when the doors are closed, who is that elected official thinking about when they're making that final decision on this budget deal, or they're making a final decision on capital allocation? Who's in their mind?
Yep.
And I think for most Marylanders, they just want to think that I just want to make sure that I'm not being forgotten when they're making these decisions. And I think the best way and the only way to do it is to be present.
Yep.
Is to show up. Is to hear people's concerns. Because the thing that I know is, whether I'm talking to someone in Baltimore or whether I'm talking to someone in St. Mary's, we're not going to agree on everything. And that's fine, because my perspectives are also both influenced by data and influenced by personal human experience. That person is being influenced by their data and their personal human experience. We're not going to agree on everything.
Yep.
But I at least want to know, and I want them to know, that even if we disagree on Tuesday, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Wednesday and finding something new to work on. And I think people see, and hopefully they see, that we're serious on that. And our team is serious on that. And so we're, we know, especially in times of difficulty and challenge, there's a lot of complication that people are trying to navigate in not just society, but in their own lives. I just want people to know that in us and in our team and in our partners, that they've got a friend and someone who's going to work with them to navigate through it.
You know what's cool about that? So many people who've been in politics for so long think, oh, bipartisanship, that's what I need. That's the message I need to give. Party schmarty, Come on, nobody cares about party. They don't care about bipartisanship or Democrat or Republican.
Correct.
They care about, basic human values. And so, so you've cut through all that.
Think about it. You weren't the selection of the Democratic Party.
No, I was the only one willing to run, though.
but I think about myself, like, I wasn't the person who the Democratic Party called up and said, what do you think about running for governor? They had plenty of choices of other people if that was the case. I knew I was never going to, I wasn't the party's choice. Right? So the only way that you or I could win is not by being the party's choice, by being the people's choice. Right? And so that's the thing that we got to focus on.
Hey, they're telling us we should stop. I know you have a cabinet meeting to get to, and we could do this all day long. But hey, I just want to tell you, how much I appreciate the fact that you are leading this state in this moment. We've got challenges coming from Washington. We've got challenges in our own budget. We've got a lot of challenges. And, man, thank God it's you. Because I'm really optimistic because of you and your team. Amazing group of people that you pulled together.
Thank God it's us.
Us. Yep.
Thank God it's us.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And if you see a subscribe button on the app you're on, just punch it, and you will get an email about who our next guest is. But I think it's hard. It's going to be hard to beat this one. Thanks, Gov.
Thanks, CE.